We want to welcome you to our monthly panel discussion for Multipliers Movement. And we have with us here our good friends. We have Kay Cotan, who is the founder of U Unlimited and Impressions Unlimited. We have Dan Pizzette, Director of Church Development for Western North Carolina Conference of the UMC, along with Kelly Brown, who is the Director of Congregational Vitality in the East Ohio Conference of the UMC. And then we have my friend Rachel Gilmore, with whom I worked from a distance as a coach. As she planted the gathering years ago and have worked alongside her as a colleague as she's been the Director of Recruiting, Assessing, and Training Church Planters at Discipleship Ministries. I'm Paul Nixon, and I'm the Director of Church Multiplication at Discipleship Ministries, and we're glad you've joined us for this conversation. Kay, you have written quite a bit about church leadership, and as we think today about leader multiplication, what do you see as critical marks of a good leader development culture within a church or within a movement?
Yeah. And I love the word culture, because I think that's a key piece of this, Paul, is it's about how to create the culture, in a local church. So I think some of the first elements are that it has to be something intentional that has some sort of a process or system behind it, but yet it's not a checklist, because if we treat it like a checklist, it's more of a knowledge base, usually process, instead of a behavioral or a growing kind of process. So I think that's the first key, is intentional. But then I think it also can't be pastor dependent, especially within our denomination where we have an appointment system. If it's pastor dependent, then that means that when we have an appointment change, then that system will probably go away. And so, it needs to fall within the responsibility of maybe nominations and lay leadership development, perhaps. But then I also think it can't be dependent on a particular curriculum, because it has to be contextualized for the local context. But then we also can't have one stale kind of curriculum that never changed. It has to evolve to kind of keep up with what's going on in the culture. And I think one other key piece of this is so often we have raised up leaders in the church, especially in our administrative kind of teams, is that a leader has that secular experience around, building trades or finances or HR. And those are all great things to bring to leadership. But because that has been raised as the most important, spiritual maturity, spiritual leadership has been minimized. And so I think we need to flip that back around and have our most mature disciples at the leadership table, particularly leading the church, and using that as the model of what spiritual leadership looks like, rather than our secular leaders being raised up as church leaders. So those are kind of some of the things that I think help with creating a good leadership development culture, if you will. So in addition, you have to anchor leadership development, with some solid training, right? That's that intentional piece, both in terms of, content and delivery systems. So, hey, Dan, in your experience, what are those marks of a solid leader training system?
GK, I'm going to have to lean down and pick up the microphone. You just dropped the mic. That was a wonderful response. Love flipping the narrative so that we really value spiritual leadership when developing leaders. So thank you for that. That, for anyone listening or watching this panel discussion, that was worth your time right there. So many times we look at leadership as institutional development. We're working up the ladder. We're promoting someone into a committee, and we're valuing committee work rather than focusing on who is out there really making disciples and valuing that work and the work that's getting done in actual ministry. And one of the ways that I've found churches get around that is to really focus on relational development. How do you relate with people? What do we do to create friendships, and to, in that friendship, to acknowledge that we're on the spiritual journey together, which helps us be able to cast a vision. And that vision casting really is where leadership comes from. This is where we're going. Let's design the steps to get there, and let's go there together. And so that happens best in a system that people are aligned, like-minded, are getting along, enjoy being around each other, take those times to create relationships. And so for leadership development systems that really work on that piece of it, you'll see that to be a more robust system than just, here are the steps you need to take to be a leader, here are the classes you need to take. Just like you were saying, it can be so institutional and so rigid that it's some hollow leadership comes out of that. The other piece is just looking at apprenticeship in a new way. I look at apprenticeship as my opportunity to lift someone up and to see the potential that God has placed in them. And so when you have that kind of relational type of leadership and you are lifting someone up, you are helping someone to see, someone that might not have thought they were a leader, to see the leadership characteristics within them. That's the type of thing that this culture and system starts to bring out when you set that up. And so it's really a cyclical piece. As you get better at doing this, you create more leaders. The leaders that have experienced this know that that's how to create leaders, and then they do it. And it really starts to multiply as you set the culture. So setting that culture is extremely important.
Dan, can I just pop in to say,
Sure.
I just think we've lost that. We've got all these processes, like people are on an assembly line, but just the relationship of one person pouring into you and just kind of hanging there with you, watching you, sharing with you in the work, and just having a season of hanging with someone that knows what they're doing and just sort of learning what would they do in this situation, so you can sort of channel that. That's how we did this for centuries before we made it over academic, in the last 150 years. So
Absolutely. That is right on. And then, you could get the system going, you have it kind of working. It has great leadership. You're really starting to see some multiplication there. And then sometimes the cabinet and or clergy they send into some places just aren't aligned with that kind of lay leadership movement. So Kelly, in your experience working around with your cabinet, how can the cabinet and clergy support a viral leadership multiplication culture versus that analog gatekeeper culture?
Thanks, Dan. And I would say that what you just shared is worth listening to even more than what Kay shared, just so you know that.
It's a competition now. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. And to answer the question is, I don't know. But as I've thought about it, and I've thought about this a lot because it's a role I'll be moving into soon. And that is a really tough question, because as I've been around the cabinet table, with the other district superintendents and with our appointment system, it really gets so focused on, I need a pastor for every church. The strategy, the leadership development, all those things get pushed to the side because I've got to get a pastor for every church. And that's what makes it so difficult for people in that role as district superintendents, because they so want to be strategic and they want to be about leadership development, but yet the needs of the system pulls them in another direction. And one of the journeys I've been on with some other folks from our conference in the last several months is a journey around community organizing, not community development, but community organizing. And I think I've learned a lot from there that would fit into this particular situation. Community organizing builds power. You grow relationships, it builds power. And with power, then you can have programs that are community development. But without power, you can't have programs. And the key to community organizing are these relationship interviews that you do to begin to organize people and to build that power. And I think as you were sharing, Dan, those relationships are the key to any leadership development. Because those relationships are what pull us together in vision to get us moving in the same direction to be able to accomplish anything. So if, as a district superintendent or a new pastor going into a church, the first question is, how am I building relationships with people that can be the next group of leaders that we need? More than what do they know or who do they know, but how well do I know them is what I need to work on. I wish I had more time to share about it, but to say that it's that relationship interview, that relationship that you build is what builds the power for the movement. And that's what we're really talking about, I think, having that power for the mission to move forward in the life of the church or in the district or a conference. And it starts with those relationship connections that can move us beyond what we know to real action. So I don't know if that was better than what Dan or Kay shared, but it's what I had to offer. And I know Rachel has been doing a lot of work in the last year around leader assessment. It's easy for people who are called to ministry to wind up in the wrong ministry, team, or right bus, wrong seat in a fast multiplying movement. How can we keep from putting great people in places and roles where they don't belong and where they are not ready to lead?
My hope is this is more valuable than what you shared, Kelly. If we're going to be competitive, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so I'm ready. I wish I had an hour, because in all honesty, it comes to how to place leaders for both clergy and laity. And what I found is sometimes cabinets will say, well, we need someone to multi-site out of this really thriving church. So quick, young, put them in there. As if that will magically do it, even though they're called to more of a house church movement. So they have that calling, but a need doesn't constitute a call to that specific type of ministry. So just making sure that you're not plugging and playing, as you kind of referenced, Kelly, that it's like, oh gosh, we got to fill all these pulpits, instead of how can we be innovative and strategic with the kind of leaders we have and partnering them together to do really innovative work for the kingdom. So just really navigating those conference relationships and the reality of our particular denomination and others when it comes to finding pastoral leadership. But then with laity, the same thing can happen, as the church starts to grow. I remember we had like 18 months in the life of the church where our worship attendance doubled, and we were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So I'm like, well, here's our worship leader. Let's just ask him now be in ministry with me. Although his family absolutely hated the thought of him being in ministry, right? So you have to look at the gifts of someone and also that support system and be really intentional and loving as you invite people into leadership. It goes back to the spiritual formation stuff that Kay was referencing, but the more that we as a faith community help all of the people who participate in the life of the faith community understand their gifts and their calling and their strengths, the more equipped they'll be to step up into leadership when that's needed. So, sometimes we think we need a new Sunday school class, so-and-so's an elementary teacher, let's put them in, but that's what they do all day long, every day, and maybe they want to serve in another way. So really helping people understand themselves and their own strengths, and then offering them opportunities to fine-tune that in that apprenticeship model, right, where they don't fail, there's someone there to guide them or walk alongside them, is huge. So assessment is crucial, knowing who you are, knowing what your gifts are, and then experimenting with it and failing forward if you do. So in leadership development, that assessment process, especially when something's fast moving, it can be hard to not rush the process. So Paul, I have a question for you. How fast is too fast in a leader multiplication process? Is there a speed limit?
There definitely is a speed limit. You can't multiply any kind of system faster than you can ramp up leaders that are ready to carry the DNA with appropriate skill and leadership to replicate something, to lead the next generation of whatever it is. So the speed limit is how fast can you ramp up leaders. If you're dealing with a system that's largely people who are already formed spiritually, maybe you can do that pretty fast. But most of the time, that's not the situation. We have to do the spiritual formation and the leadership formation, like Jesus did, all right? So it takes a while. Jesus took 3 years. Well, let's say it took 2 years, because it may have taken to collect all those characters, but it took a while. But it didn't take forever. And during that time frame, he was pouring in but he also was letting them try, you know. Dan and I we worked with Crossroads Church in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. It was a program where we were working with them to teach other churches how to do multi-site ministry and multiply. And I recall that one of the big ideas that we learned there with them was that when you're doing apprenticing, mentoring, you know, you're carrying someone along, it's easy okay, you're going to watch me. Now I'm going to watch you. But there's that middle space. It's called the we space. It's where we're doing this together. That should be most of the space. And we make a mistake when we diminish that, because it's during the we space that if Kay is mentoring me, it's during that period of time that I just sort of catch on. I begin to realize, I watch kind of how she reacted to that. I watch how she kind of stepped back and kind of assessed that. And I'm just assimilating that. And she doesn't even have to teach me this. It's just by osmosis, I begin to get a sense of that. Interestingly, during that project, during that seminar in Pittsburgh, I got really sick. And it was my project, and Dan was along kind of as my helper, okay? But I got really sick, like so sick, I just went to bed, and he had to fly the airplane. I have no idea what he was doing, but the point is that we've worked on that model of project several times since then, and we're in it together now because he flew the airplane, you know. And so we have it's that sharing, you know, whatever it is, whoever is leading out and whoever you're bringing together, it's the sharing and the doing that is how the learning happens. And I would say 9 months to 3 years. My favorite book on this topic is the book Hero Maker by Bird. I'm using it with everybody. Everybody. And I continue to get rave reviews back from people. They said this was a breakthrough for me. What I want to do right now, if I might, is I want to read from one of my clients. She's a lay pastor, and she wrote some reflections back to me as she was processing that, and it's revolutionizing her. She's a go-getter, but we're going to ramp her up. She's doing the little napkin thing where you add 2 zeros and scale it up. But this is what she wrote. She said, "I've come to realize, and I've taken longer to accept, that I have a gift of seeing potential in others and have a deep desire to enable that personal growth and awareness of their own greatness and uniqueness. This has meant giving up on being the person who is out front and all the wrestles and ego stuff that comes with that, to an understanding that I am the person who props, reminds, and encourages and delights in another's growth. It's about releasing people into their own strengths rather than duplicating your own." You know, that's a high capacity leader who is about to go to the next level. Because she's so great. I mean, we could just sit around, watch her do her thing, you know, because she's awesome. She's built a great ministry in a mid-sized city she's a rock star. But now she's looking far, far beyond that. She's talking about how to equip people to be the hero. Are there any other resources, though, that you all have found helpful besides that one, besides Hero Maker? Just anybody?
Well, our colleague here, Kelly Brown, and another friend of ours, Willard, Church Ecology,
Cool.
which is a good resource.
I think a book that I like to help leaders who are facing burnout from doing too much alone is Wayne Cordero's book, Leading on Empty. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And this might cause some eye rolls because this might be cliche, but I overlooked this book for a while, and my leadership just took a next level when I finally got to it. And that's going back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. If you're a person that tends to get caught putting out fires and lets leadership get in the back seat, that vision casting in the back seat, that's a great book to inspire you.
Alrighty. Well, we've been exploring the challenge of leader multiplication, and it's like this radical departure from a culture of simply replacing old leaders with new leaders. So I hope that all of you will join us next time as the panel discusses the broader questions of how we multiply disciples.
Make sure you like us, follow us on Facebook. A lot of resources there on Facebook for Multipliers Movement. Be a part of the conversation with comments and so forth there as we continue to share in podcasts and panel discussions and writing things there for the page. So make sure you follow us there, share that information with others, and join us in the Multipliers Movement. Because remember, today is the day to multiply your impact.